The movie opens with a reporter announcing the passing of a famous young couple. They were the children of two traditional families in Verona that are known for their rivalry. Sadly, the years-old spite culminated in a tragedy for both families. The couple in question fell in love, but they couldn't be together because of their families. Their names are Romeo Montague and Juliet Capulet. Their story is set in the beautiful city of Verona Beach, where the two families, Capulets and Montagues, are rival mafia empires. Their violence and rivalry make Verona a dangerous place to live. Before Romeo and Juliet meet each other and start their romance, there's a fight between the gangs in the middle of downtown Verona that leads to the arrest of two prominent members, Romeo's cousin Benvolio and Juliet's cousin Tybalt. The family patriarchs, Ted Montague and Fulgencio Capulet, have to bail their nephews out of jail, under the threat of execution in case there's another fight. After they are released, Ted and his wife, Caroline, talk about Romeo. Caroline is glad that Romeo wasn't with his cousin at the time of the fight, otherwise he could have hurt himself. They are worried about him because he's depressed and barely leaves his room anymore. Romeo is a young man in his early 20s. He's handsome, with messy blonde hair and expressive blue eyes. Romeo is a lover, not a fighter. He's tired of his family's constant skirmishes with the Capulets, and the violence that comes out of it. As the heir of the Montagues, he isn't sure he wants to continue with his father's legacy. His parents ask Benvolio to talk to him, to figure out why Romeo is so somber. Romeo explains that he wants love in his life. He's a hopeless romantic, not a violent soul. His cousin tries to convince him to stop moping about, but Romeo ignores him. Across the city, another heir and the most sought-after bachelor in Verona, Dave Paris, talks to Juliet's father about a possible union between them. He wants to marry her and get a share of Capulet's empire. Fulgencio denies his request, because Juliet is still too young to marry. He invites Dave to a New Year's Eve party instead, and he eagerly agrees. The party is going to be huge, and filled with important people. Back to Romeo, he continues to complain to his cousin about the woman he wants to meet. He doesn't want someone whose main concerns are money and power. He desires someone with an honest heart, that will be able to love him for who he is, not what name he has. Benvolio believes he has to go out with more women before he meets the love of his life, making Romeo frustrated. Because he doesn't understand. Benvolio only thinks about carnal pleasure and lack of intimacy, the opposite of Romeo. Benvolio promises him that he will find a woman that is so beautiful that Romeo will forget all others. He doubts that is possible. As they talk, they see the announcement of the Capulets' party happening that day, and decide it would be a good idea to crash the party. They are excited to create mischief in their enemy's lair. At the Capulets' mansion, Juliet's mother, Gloria, looks desperately for her. The mansion is ready for the splendorous party that is about to happen, and Gloria is worried that her daughter is not dressed yet. Gloria is an extravagant woman that only cares about power and beauty. She wants Juliet to find the best match in the city to get married, and in her not-so-humble opinion, this man is Dave Paris. Juliet is in her room playing in her bathwater when she hears her mother's shrill screams. Juliet is a pretty woman, with long brown hair and bright blue eyes. Despite her mother's wishes for a perfect angel as a daughter, Juliet is anything but. She's fierce in what she believes, and even a bit rebellious. When her mother finds her, she informs Juliet about Dave Paris's presence, and that he would make a wonderful husband. Juliet doesn't think so. After her mother leaves, her nurse suggests she finds the one that she loves, even if it's not Paris. Juliet smirks at the idea and gets ready for the party. Ironically, she wears an angel costume for the party, including wings. The costume makes Juliet appear delicate and graceful, with an innocent air around her. In the meantime, Romeo is at a park with his friends and cousin waiting for his friend, Mercutio, to show up with the invitations. He's wearing a knight's costume, which is ironic considering he's about to do something not very honorable. Mercutio appears with the invitation, and they all celebrate in happiness. Only Romeo doesn't seem very excited about the prospect of creating mischief. Barely anything gives him excitement for the past few months. Mercutio, a boisterous young man, notices his friend's somberness and tries to cheer him up. Once again, Romeo complains about love. He wants to fall in love, but he's also afraid of what it might cause him. Mercutio believes he's being overdramatic and offers something to take his mind off his depression. An illegal that will make Romeo euphoric. He presents the substance as a potent substitute for love. Much like love, Romeo will feel euphoric and excited, his pupils will dilate, his heart will beat faster, and his body will heat to the point of discomfort. He will feel as if he could conquer the world and fight all his enemies. At the same time, the substance could have the opposite effect on him. He could see the darkness and listen to somber thoughts. Romeo has no idea what will happen to him, but he has a foreboding feeling. He feels as if his life might be hanging on the edge of a knife. They arrive at the party at last. Romeo doesn't look well. Different from his friends, the substance made him hallucinate and feel bad. The party overwhelms him, and he needs a moment alone. As he stares at an aquarium, lost in the colorful fish, his eyes connect with another pair of blue eyes. It's Juliet. She looks beautiful with her angel costume, and her image makes Romeo's heart soar. They watch each other through the aquarium, not knowing they are the heirs of their families, enemies without even knowing. Juliet's nurse suddenly shows up, interrupting their staring contest, and takes Juliet away against her will. Juliet wants to keep staring at the young man she saw, but her mother's calling her. Dave Paris wants to dance with her, and she's forced to accept. Her mind isn't on the most sought-after bachelor in Verona, though, it's on Romeo. He follows her to the party and watches as she dances with Paris. They can't stop looking at each other. Like a moth to a flame, Romeo watches Juliet dancing with the chatty Paris. Tybalt notices Romeo Montague is at the party, and tries to go after him. Fulgencio stops him, ordering him to leave Romeo alone for the moment. Tybalt almost goes against his uncle's orders, but Fulgencio isn't a man to be trifled with. Romeo believes he's in love with the beautiful girl as he watches her dancing. His heart is beating in a way he has never felt before, and they haven't even talked yet. Juliet dances with Paris, but her mind and eyes are on Romeo the whole time. When it's time for the countdown to the new year, Romeo grabs Juliet by the hand and pulls her toward him. Juliet's heart almost stops when she sees him so close to her. They flirt for a moment and Romeo tries kissing her, but she averts her face. Before her mother and Paris realize that her attention is elsewhere, Romeo pulls her away from the party to an elevator. In the elevator, Romeo professes his wish to purge his sins by kissing Juliet's sweet lips. They kiss for the first time, not even knowing each other's names and what they represent. Their kisses are passionate and filled with an emotion they can't name yet. For Romeo, kissing Juliet is like finding his purpose in life. As for Juliet, Romeo's lips are the best she has ever touched. Sadly, all good things come to an end. Caroline is searching for Juliet everywhere, and her nurse finds her with Romeo. Her nurse immediately recognizes Romeo as a Montague. She warns Juliet that her mother is looking for her, and pulls her away from Romeo. They stare at each other as Juliet is taken from Romeo's arms. He follows her with his eyes, trying to commit her beauty to his memory. It's only when he sees Caroline that he comes to his senses. He knows Caroline is a Capulet, which can only mean Juliet is one too. Juliet's nurse also chides her for mingling with a Montague. Juliet didn't know, though, not that his surname changes the way she feels about him. She doesn't care about her family's empire or petty fights. Romeo's friends take him away from the party. Juliet follows him through the house, afraid that this is the last time she will see him. Romeo also seeks her in the crowd. At last, Juliet appears on the balcony as Romeo leaves. As they stare at each other, their eyes are filled with hidden emotions: fear, passion, excitement, and dread. Another person also watches as Romeo and his friends leave. Tybalt swears vengeance on the Montagues for crashing their party and making them fools. Differently from Fulgencio, Tybalt cares more about honor, and he feels humiliated by Romeo's presence at the party. He dared enter their home without fear that they would find him. It's a blow to Tybalt's ego. Before they can leave the property, Romeo jumps out of the car to go after Juliet. He can't stop himself. Mercutio tries to call him back, making fun of his passion. But Romeo doesn't listen to him. Romeo manages to get into the back of the house, right under Juliet's window. He tries climbing the wall to try and see if she's in her bedroom, but her nurse shows up instead. Romeo quickly hides before he can be caught. He's in enemy territory, after all, and the consequences of his trespassing wouldn't be nice. Fortunately for him, Juliet shows up, and she's very close to him. Romeo hears her whispering his name like a prayer and a curse. It's good to get validation that she's as befuddled as he is, with this new passion between them. Romeo stays silent as she complains about his surname and the idiocy of their caring about their family's legacy. She doesn't care if he's a Montague, and she would change her family name for him. Romeo falls even harder at hearing that his name doesn't matter to her. Women always go after him seeking power and money, but Juliet doesn't need it, because she already has it. She was born into it, just like he was. No one in the world can understand him better than her. Romeo approaches her silently and whispers to her that he accepts her the way she is. Juliet screams in shock, and they fall into the pool. Juliet is worried about Romeo, knowing how dangerous it is for him to be there. Romeo fearlessly claims that if he has a chance to be with her, he doesn't care about the consequences. He finally found the one he loves, and he will never let her go. It doesn't matter if they were made to hate each other for eternity, their love will prevail. Juliet is afraid that Romeo is being led by passion, not love. Romeo promises her that he loves her, and swears in God's name that he will always do so. It's good enough for Juliet. They kiss passionately and profess their love for each other continuously, until Juliet has to go back home. They don't know when they will see each other again, but they hope their love will be stronger by then. If not, then they weren't meant to be. Before Juliet leaves, Romeo asks her for her confession of love and loyalty. She happily confesses her love for him, and her wish to be married to him. If he wants to be with her, they need to marry as soon as possible. If he wakes up and his feelings aren't the same, then he should leave her alone. They promise to see each other the next day, and Juliet leaves after giving Romeo a token of her love, her cross necklace. The next day, early in the morning, Romeo goes to the church to talk to Father Lawrence, the priest of Verona's church. Father Lawrence has known Romeo for many years, and he knows how dramatic the young man can be. When Romeo starts talking about love, he wonders if he has been with Rosalind again. Rosalind is Romeo's old flame, and he was as passionate with her as he is with Juliet. Romeo doesn't even remember Rosalind anymore. The only person in his mind and heart is Juliet. When Romeo explains that he met and fell in love with the Capulet girl, Father Lawrence is shocked. He can't believe Romeo would be so irresponsible as to have a relationship with his family's enemy. Romeo asks the priest to marry them, and Father Lawrence agrees after he has a vision. In his vision, he sees the age-old feud between the two most important families in Verona coming to an end. The city won't be as violent and they will finally have peace. While Romeo is arranging his secret wedding, Benvolio and Mercutio look for him. Tybalt sent a letter to the Montague family to challenge Romeo to a duel. He wants to make him pay for his blatant disrespect the night before at the party. Mercutio is worried about Romeo, because Tybalt is well known for being a great duelist. Romeo shows up looking good and bright as a summer day. He's not somber and depressed anymore, not after finding his great love. As they goof around, an older lady shows up to talk to Romeo. It's Juliet's nurse. Romeo is worried something happened to Juliet, but the nurse is there to find out Romeo's intentions. Romeo explains that he isn't taking advantage of Juliet, and he wants to marry her that same day. The nurse is glad and happy that Juliet will marry someone she loves, not someone her parents choose for her. While Romeo is talking to the nurse, Mercutio watches from afar. He isn't happy about Romeo's distance, and fears there's something amiss with his friend. He wonders if Romeo will have dinner with his family in the evening, and Romeo promises he will be there. Juliet eagerly waits for the nurse to come back with news from Romeo. After stalling for a moment, the nurse finally tells Juliet the good news. Romeo is more than ready to marry her, like a proper gentleman. Later on that day, the wedding happens. Juliet wears a cute white dress, and Romeo a nice suit. There are no guests from their families, and only a few people are witnesses to their union. They pledge their love and loyalty to each other, and the priest pronounces them husband and wife. Unbeknownst to them, a storm is coming. While they are celebrating their love, their families are fighting again. Tybalt shows up at the beach where the Montague gang usually stays. He pushes Mercutio until they get into an argument that almost ends in violence again. Before they can get physical, though, Romeo shows up and hurries in their direction. Romeo wants to put an end to their war, but Tybalt has another idea. He still wants revenge on Romeo for his family's humiliation, and they can only solve it through a duel. Tybalt empties his gun's chamber but for one bullet. Mercutio does the same to Romeo's gun. Romeo refuses to fight Tybalt, saying that he now loves Tybalt, and that he will soon understand why. He turns his back on him, much to his friends' and enemies' shock. Tybalt feels humiliated again by Romeo's brush-off. He runs after him and starts beating Romeo while the others watch. No one comes to Romeo's rescue, because that's the way things are. He should fight his own battles. Romeo once again says that he loves Tybalt, and can't bear the thought of hurting him. He knows that if he executes Tybalt, Juliet will be heartbroken. They promised their families wouldn't come between them. And Romeo won't go back on his word to his beloved. He even offers his own gun to Tybalt, to end him if he feels the need. Tybalt gets even angrier and starts beating Romeo, while he does nothing. His submission is humiliating to his friends and family, especially to Mercutio. He can't accept the fact that Romeo is submitting to their enemy. To salvage their family's reputation, Mercutio enters the fray and fights with Tybalt. Romeo tries to stop Mercutio before he lands the ending blow on Tybalt, distracting Mercutio and giving Tybalt a chance at retribution. He wounds Mercutio badly. At first, Mercutio pretends it's a small wound, but he soon realizes that he will pass away from it. When he comes to the realization he will pass after fighting a war that doesn't even belong to him, he curses both families. Romeo tries going after Mercutio, but he pushes him away. Mercutio's words bring forth a storm. From that day on, Montague and Capulet will never be the same. Mercutio passes away in Romeo's arms. Watching his best friend pass after fighting for his honor fills Romeo with a rotten feeling, hatred. For the first time in his life, he understands what his father and forefathers felt for their lifelong enemies. Blind by the hatred, Romeo goes after Tybalt with Benvolio. His cousin tries to stop Romeo, knowing that taking someone's life would destroy his sensitive soul. Romeo is too angry to be stopped, though. He doesn't even think about his beloved Juliet and his need for revenge. In the meantime, Juliet is in her house, dreaming of Romeo and finally consummating their marriage. Romeo chases Tybalt and the Capulet gets into an accident. Tybalt is very wounded, but he manages to leave his car and grab his gun before Romeo does. Tybalt points the gun at Romeo, promising to execute him, but instead of being afraid, Romeo presses him to do it. He believes that the two of them need to pay for Mercutio's passing. Seeing how passionate Romeo is, Tybalt drops the gun and runs. He feels guilty about Mercutio and regrets executing him. Sadly for him, Romeo isn't in a forgiving mood. He shoots Tybalt in the middle of the street, not caring who is witnessing the cold-blooded execution. Romeo is in shock after he sees Tybalt's lifeless body falling into the water. He knows there's no way back from what he did. His soul is tainted forever. Benvolio helps Romeo escape the scene. A few moments later, the Capulet family arrives, along with the Montagues. Caroline cries over Tybalt, her beloved nephew. Everyone is shocked. The chief of the police, Captain Prince, interrogates Benvolio and finds out Romeo executed Tybalt because of Mercutio. Ted Montague tries to reason with Prince, but the crime is clear and there's no way out for Romeo. He must pay. The chief announces to the entire town that Romeo is banished from Verona. Romeo goes to the church, where the priest hides him. He is distraught over the banishment, and Father Lawrence comforts him. Romeo doesn't want to leave Verona. He believes he will be lost, away from the city he was born and raised in. Father Lawrence scoffs and chides his childish cries over the injustice of it all. Romeo eventually had to learn to pay for his mistakes, and the moment arrived. The nurse goes to the church looking for him in the name of Juliet. His wife can't stop crying, but not all is lost for them. She isn't mad at him, only sad about what happened. She sent her wedding ring to the nurse to give Romeo some hope about their future. Romeo's sourness lifts when he knows Juliet is waiting for him. The priest advises him to go after her to comfort her, but to not stay too long, because of the sentinels. Romeo agrees. Father Lawrence is hopeful that all will end well, and Romeo will eventually be forgiven. After all, Tybalt wasn't innocent. They say their goodbyes, hugging tightly, and then Romeo's off. Back in her home, Juliet prays for Romeo and her cousin. She's sad about what happened to Tybalt, but she's more worried about Romeo. Paris shows up at the house to try and court her, but she refuses to leave the room. Her parents believe it's because she's grieving, not knowing that Juliet is now a married woman, and her husband is the culprit for their pain. Romeo appears in her room with a bashful expression. He doesn't know what her reaction will be. Juliet smiles and hugs him right away. There are no words to describe the emotions they are feeling. They can only show each other. The newlywed couple consummates the wedding while Juliet's father discusses her marriage to Paris. He wants Juliet to marry right away, whether she wants it or not. The next morning, Romeo wakes up from a nightmare with Tybalt. He feels terribly guilty about what he did. After cooling his head, Juliet sleeps peacefully next to him, and he wants to stay with her forever. He needs to go, though, before someone comes to her room. When she awakens, she asks him not to go, and they start kissing each other and making promises. Her nurse suddenly barges into the room, warning them that Caroline is coming to Juliet's room. Romeo quickly has to go, but Juliet follows him. He promises that they will soon see each other again, to start living as a couple. He's hopeful for their future after the amazing night they had. As Caroline enters the room, Romeo jumps from the ledge of the balcony, falling into the pool. Juliet feels a bad omen as she watches him drowning, and begs God for mercy. Caroline informs Juliet of the good news. Juliet can't believe she will be forced to marry someone she doesn't love. She refuses to accept. Her father arrives, and Caroline informs him of their daughter's decision. He's not happy. He believes Juliet is spoiled and selfish, and she will marry Paris. Juliet tries to explain that she can't marry another man, but he won't hear it. He gets violent with Juliet, Caroline, and even the nurse. He warns Juliet that if she doesn't marry Paris, he will desert her completely. Juliet begs her mother to help her, but Caroline coldly turns her back on her only child. The only one on Juliet's side is the nurse, but even she's speechless. After a moment, the nurse advises Juliet to accept the marriage proposal. Paris isn't a bad man, and he genuinely likes her. If she doesn't accept him, then Romeo will suffer the consequences. His name is already in the gutter. If her father finds out about her marriage to him, he will execute Romeo. Juliet agrees and decides to go to Father Lawrence to receive absolution for her sins. At the church, the father is talking to Paris about the wedding. Paris is happy about his union with Juliet, though a bit worried because her family is violent. When Juliet shows up, he calls her his wife, much to her chagrin. The last thing she wants to be is Paris's wife, not when her heart already belongs to Romeo. She informs the priest that she needs to talk to him, and Paris decides to leave them alone. Before they goes, he kisses Juliet's cheek, an intimate act that causes revulsion to Juliet. After he leaves, she runs to the priest's office and begs for a solution to her problem. Father Lawrence has no idea of what to do. Juliet is desperate and tired of all the mess in her life. The only thing she wants is to be with her beloved Romeo in peace. If she can't, then she prefers to end right there. Father Lawrence realizes that she's not in a healthy mental state, and she needs help. He has an idea, though it's a dangerous one. He will make medicine for Juliet so she can pretend she passed away. The medicine will prevent her from breathing or being warm to the touch. When everyone believes she passed away, then she will have the opportunity to escape with Romeo. Juliet readily agrees. After all, they have no other option at the moment. Sadly, they don't tell Romeo about their brilliant idea. That very same day, Juliet drinks the medicine before going to bed. She says goodbye to her mother for the last time and goes to sleep. The following morning, she's pronounced gone. At her funeral, Romeo's friend, and the second witness to their wedding, finds out that she passed away and goes after Romeo to tell him. Romeo is living in the desert at a trailer park, waiting for the right moment to leave with Juliet. When the boy shows up with the news, Romeo's world falls apart. Juliet was his salvation and only hope, and now she's gone. He can't believe it. He didn't get to see, touch, and kiss her for one last time. He doesn't understand why she would do something like that. As usual with Romeo, when he's in turmoil, he acts recklessly. Father Lawrence wakes from his nap with a feeling of foreboding. Something bad is about to happen. At the same time, the police receive a warning that Romeo is back in Verona. The chief sends all his police officers to go after him. Romeo goes to a man who makes deadly poisons and buys one. With that, he believes he will be reunited with Juliet. The police chase Romeo, and he ends up at the church. There, he sees for the first time Juliet's prostrate body. It's the proof he needed that she's really gone. The pain he feels is so fierce that it momentarily silences him. Romeo caresses Juliet and talks to her for the last time before he takes the poison. The poison is halfway into his mouth when Juliet wakes and touches him. By then, it's already too late for Romeo. He finds out she's alive, and that it was all a plan to free her from her family's clutches. The poison takes immediate effect in Romeo, and he agonizes as Juliet holds him. She sees the small bottle in his hand, and understands the situation. Crying, she kisses him to see if the poison that is left on his lips will take her away too. Romeo slowly passes away, and Juliet sees no other option but to follow him. This time, for good. She finds his gun and shoots. The star-crossed lovers lie down next to each other for the last time. It's a tragedy with no precedent for both families. For the first time, they share something in common, the pain of losing a child. The chief of the police punishes all of them, Montagues and Capulets, but no punishment is harsher than the reality of losing their heirs. The day is sad in Verona, with dark skies and a somber mood. Romeo and Juliet's love story will forever be remembered as a great love that ended in tragedy, all because of greed for power and money.